except for his right hand. He was so ignored by the world that he lost any hope of getting laid. However, everything changed when the hottest baddie in school became interested in him and wanted to clap him. It all began one day when Shiraishi sat alone in class, lost in thoughts of how useless and worthless his life seemed because he was completely ghosted by everyone in the world. But then, Kubo, the prettiest girl in school, approached him. She was the only one who ever noticed his disgusting face. She immediately glanced at his phone and discovered that the ugly doofus was making a bucket list filled with nasty things he wanted to do, so she snapped a photo of it to use as leverage. So when the useless teacher, who was a literal house rat, started lecturing, Kubo threatened Shiraishi to carry out some humiliating tasks in class, or she would share his list with the school's WhatsApp group, so he did as she demanded. Throughout that day, Shiraishi resented Kubo for forcing him to do those embarrassing acts. However, Kubo explained that she wasn't the villain in his story. She was just trying to help his paper bag face get noticed in school and avoid fading into obscurity. The following day at school, Kubo approached Shiraishi, seething with anger. Shiraishi asked her what was wrong, but she refused to say. He offered her a drink to calm her down, but she declined. Confused, Shiraishi admitted he had no idea why she was upset, so Kubo decided to punish him by sitting on his thighs. As she did just that, the dude lost 1,000,000 brain cells and nearly had a seizure. After the torment, she got up and mentioned that the reason for her anger was a secret she would reveal another time. Later that day in class, Kubo saw Shiraishi talking to the pen-sized teacher and asked if he was asking a question. Shiraishi explained that he was trying to make sure the teacher knew he existed and had actually attended class that day. As part of Kubo's plan to help the poor loser get noticed in class, she raised her hand as if to answer a question, and when the Smurf teacher called on her, she shifted the attention to Shiraishi. The two absolute menaces spent the rest of the day answering questions in class like they were ChatGPT. At the end of the school day, Kubo asked Shiraishi for his social messenger username so she could buzz him up, but before the ugly ass could give it to her, two random students invited Kubo to lunch, so she ditched Shiraishi's worthless ass. Shortly after, Shiraishi got home and remembered that the latest Call of Duty game was being released that day, so the lonely nerd rushed out to be the first to buy it. Unfortunately, he couldn't get a copy because he was too ugly to be noticed, so he went to the park to sulk. A little later, he ran into Kubo at the park and explained his sad situation to her. To cheer the sad shitface up, Kubo decided to take a picture of him so he could finally have a photo of himself for the first time in his sad, depressing life. But when she tried, the phone's camera couldn't detect his face because it was too ugly, and the sensor mistook it for dog poop. She tried again, and this time, decided to take a selfie with him, but the savage camera only recognized her face. After numerous attempts, she finally managed to get one decent picture of him. As she was leaving, Kubo remembered to get Shiraishi's social messenger username so she could send him the selfie. They exchanged usernames, and she said goodbye, promising to hang out with him another day. That night, Shiraishi couldn't stop thinking about Kubo, the first girl ever to exchange Discord contacts with him. As he stared at his phone, a message from Kubo suddenly popped up, asking if he'd like to hang out sometime soon, catching him off guard since he hadn't expected her actually to reach out. He quickly replied, faster than a disgusting fatso on a Snickers bar, saying he was more than okay with hanging out. The next day at school, Shiraishi felt drowsy in class after staying up all night playing Fortnite. He considered taking a nap, thinking no one would notice since he was practically invisible to everyone. As he glanced over, he saw Kubo already dozing off, and he was captivated by her beauty. Just then, she turned and looked at him, which caused the loser's brain to have a partial reset. Later that day, Shiraishi was walking down the hall, completely drained after an intense sports activity. He suddenly ran into Kubo and immediately tried to retreat, worried she might catch the horrible stench coming from his sweaty, disgusting body. To his surprise, she approached him, took a sniff, and told him that his disgusting odor was actually rizzing her up. The following afternoon, Shiraishi discovered that the latest volume of his favorite manga had just been released, so he hurried to the bookstore to grab a copy. As soon as he arrived, Kubo spotted him struggling with the automatic sliding door, which seemed to reject him because even technology hated his toxic face. After several useless attempts to enter, Kubo took pity on him and helped him with the stubborn door. Once inside, Shiraishi explained to Kubo that the doors often didn't respond to him because he was so insignificant and practically non-existent. A few minutes later, Kubo asked him what he was there to buy, noticing that he was aimlessly wandering around the bookstore like a useless thief. So he showed her the latest manga he came to get. Kubo was thrilled because she also loved reading manga, but when she moved to grab a copy, she realized the previous volumes were sold out. She then asked Shiraishi if she could borrow a copy from his extensive manga collection, and he agreed. As they left the bookstore and headed home, Kubo realized that she and Shiraishi lived just 5 minutes away from each other, so she insisted on dropping by his shank. Hearing this, the dude almost gave up the ghost, but with no other choice, the worthless simp led her to his home. On getting to his crib, Shiraishi gave her the manga, promising to lend her more if she needed them. Kubo then asked what time he usually left for school, but little did the moron know that she was planning to accompany him to school every day from then on. The next morning, Kubo woke up determined to win over her crush, Shiraishi. She bathed, put on her school uniform, and applied her sister Akina's best hair mist. Akina immediately noticed something was off, and during breakfast her last 2 brain cells finally clicked. She imagined that Kubo was trying to impress someone, so she moved closer and sniffed Kubo's hair, discovering that her sister had used her expensive hair mist. With her theory confirmed, Akina asked Kubo if she had a crush, which caught Kubo off guard. Flustered, Kubo tried to dodge the question and quickly left for school. On her way to school, she hid behind a wall to secretly wait for Shiraishi. Soon enough, Anime's most unfortunate victim arrived with his usual messed up face. On seeing him, Kubo immediately jumped out from her hiding spot, startling Shiraishi. She demanded they walk to school together, but was disappointed when Shiraishi didn't notice the effort she had put into looking good and smelling like mint. After walking for a while, they sat down, and they were soon joined by Tama and Hazuki, Kubo's friends, who completely overlooked Shiraishi until Kubo pointed him out. Feeling uncomfortable around the girls, Shiraishi quickly made his exit. Tama then told Kubo she was impressed that Kubo had managed to spot Shiraishi, saying it meant good luck would come her way. However, despite being accompanied to school by Kubo and her baddies, Shiraishi's life quickly returned to its usual state of loneliness and invisibility. After school that day, Shiraishi was walking home, worn out from a tough day, when a car splashed him with water, soaking him completely. He wondered why life seemed to treat him worse than a stray dog. Embarrassed but determined to get home, he continued his walk and unexpectedly ran into Kubo, who offered to escort him home so he could dry off. When they reached Shiraishi's place, he realized he had left his key inside and was locked out. In desperation, he considered washing up at the park like a homeless hobo, but Kubo suggested he come to her house instead to clean up and dry off. A few minutes later, they arrived at Kubo's home, and on getting inside her room, the disgusting cultured idiot immediately noticed her arsenal of plot armor and began to have nasty thoughts, so Shiraishi covered up her treasury from his cultured eyes. However, being inside a girl's room was giving him a hard time in more ways than one. So after taking a shower, the chief loner wore Kubo's tracksuit, thanked her, and headed home to his loneliness. The following day at school, Shiraishi found Kubo on the staircase and returned her tracksuit, thanking her for letting him borrow it. Curious, Kubo asked if the tracksuit fit him well, and Shiraishi confirmed it did. Hearing his response, she inquired about his height, and he told her he was 5'4". In response, she playfully climbed a few steps and teasingly mentioned that she liked short guys because the shorter they were, the more rugged they seemed. A few weeks later, it was the end of the second semester exams, marking the start of the holidays. After class, Kubo tried to strike up a conversation with Shiraishi, but he quickly excused himself, telling her that he had plans for the day. Later, Shiraishi took his younger brother, Sita, to the park. While watching Sita play in the snow, his peaceful time was interrupted by Kubo, who offered him a drink. He politely declined, but Sita arrived and eagerly asked for the drink. Shiraishi refused to give it to him, which made Sita sad. Seeing the disappointed look on Sita's face, Kubo handed him the drink, instantly making him the happiest kid around. Later that day, Shiraishi was home alone and decided to catch up on some manga. However, he realized he'd been reading the same series for a while and needed something new, so he headed to the bookstore to get the latest release of his favorite weekly magazine. Inside the store, he cited some steamy magazines that charged his magnum. Feeling too embarrassed to go pick up the magazine, he remembered no one would probably notice him, so with all the confidence in the world, he headed to the magazine shelf. Getting to the shelf, he stared at the ginormous milker of the model posing on the front cover of the magazine. However, Shiraishi was startled when Akina, who was an attendant at the store, approached him. She told him he was too young to be looking at such soz material. Panicked, Shiraishi tried to hide the magazine, but it was too late. At that moment, Shiraishi wondered how this nosy girl had even noticed him. He glanced at her name tag and was shocked to realize that her last name was also Kubo. He quickly handed the magazine back to Akina and hurried out of the store, but not before accidentally dropping his school ID. Akina picked it up and noticed that Shiraishi attended the same school as her sister Kubo. That evening, she brought the ID home and showed it to Kubo, describing the owner as a disgusting, creepy guy she had caught staring at the humongous globes of models and magazine. Upon seeing the ID, Kubo's mood immediately dropped as she realized her crush liked thick giant, rather than her flat plots flatter than a surfboard. The next morning at school, Kubo returned Shiraishi's student ID and he was surprised, wondering how she had gotten it. She revealed that her sister had found it at the bookstore, which clued Shiraishi in that the menace incarnate who caught him there was actually Kubo's sister. Kubo then bluntly asked him if he liked women with large chesticles, and before he could respond, she walked away, calling him a weirdo. Later that day in class, Kubo reminded Shiraishi of his promise to hang out together, so he asked her to pick a date. So she chose Christmas Day for their outing. When Christmas arrived, Shiraishi made his way to the train station for their date but couldn't find Kubo at first. He waited and soon enough, Kubo arrived, grabbed his hand and handed him a gift she had bought for him, telling him it was his Christmas present. She told him it was his Christmas gift and then demanded they do a gift exchange, but the psycho explained that the kind of gift he wanted was the one that could fix his disgusting face. However, Kubo continued to insist he get her a gift, but the dude was a complete broke ass, so she had to literally push his ass to go into the store. After several hours, Shiraishi came back with a mitten and apologized for being a brokey as that was the only thing he could afford. However, Kudo was not like the gold-digging IG baddies, so she accepted his poor gift and told him she liked it. The next day in school, Shiraishi, who had a poor fashion sense, wore socks of unequal length and was ashamed of how they looked on him because he thought they would make him look cool like Kanye West. Just then, Kubo and her friends walked into the classroom discussing Valentine's Day. Shiraishi stared at Kubo and realized she seemed different than usual, so he wondered what could be wrong. Shortly afterward, just when Shiraishi thought he had made it through the day without anyone noticing his weird dress sense, Kubo approached him and asked for his help in putting up a signpost. Kubo then tried putting up the post on the wall herself, but her efforts were as useless as your face, so Shiraishi offered to help her out, but as he tried putting up the signpost, he couldn't because he was shorter than Kevin Hart. So he tried using a chair, but just then, Kubo noticed his odd fashion sense, which embarrassed Shiraishi. A few minutes later, Kubo climbed the chair, posting the warning on the wall, and Shiraishi couldn't stop staring at her hot thighs. Kubo immediately noticed him staring at her thighs and called him an ugly perv, so Shiraishi tried explaining, but he soon began to experience some technical difficulties. Shortly afterward, Kubo invited Shiraishi for a cup of coffee at the convenience store, which stunned him. Later on, they went for coffee, and Shiraishi thought of having meat buns instead. Some hours later, they headed home, and Kubo asked Shiraishi if he wanted to taste her coffee, which he declined. However, she insisted on having a taste of his meat, which shocked him. But before he could say anything, Kubo swallowed the meat whole. Weeks later, on Valentine's Day, in order to get in the girls' panties, all the worthless losers butter up the girls with kindness. However, for Shiraishi, Valentine's Day was just an ordinary, boring day because his single ass had no girl to call his own. He had a track record of being forgotten by everyone, but on this particular Valentine, he received an incognito chocolate gift under his desk and wondered who would have thought it important to give him a gift. At that moment, he immediately thought of Kubo as she was the only girl in the world who had taken notice of his pathetic ass. Following this, Kubo approached Shiraishi, and he asked her about the sudden chocolate gift, but she denied it. Meanwhile, the day before Valentine's, Kubo had tried making chocolates with Akina, which she flawed as she was a Gen Z baddie who didn't know how to cook, and at the 99th trial, she was finally able to make a bar of reasonable chocolate. On seeing the chocolate, Akina assured her that whoever she was giving the chocolate gift to was indeed lucky as she made it with love, which made Kubo flustered. On the other hand, in Shiraishi's room, he wondered who would have been responsible for giving him the bar of chocolate. The next day at school, during lunch, Shiraishi, who had been eating in odd places around the school because of his invisibility issue, decided to eat outside the school for a change. As he sat down to enjoy his lunch, he unexpectedly encountered Kubo, who insisted on joining him. When Shiraishi opened his lunchbox, Kubo peered inside and noticed that he had brought a rather fancy intercontinental dish. She immediately suggested they trade meals, and as she tried to feed him her omelette with her hand, Shiraishi became tense and quickly grabbed the food, not letting her feed him. Shortly after, Shiraishi returned the gesture, feeding her some of his food. The way the thirsty chick ate it in a sauce manner triggered Shiraishi's senses, and bro turned from anime to manga. Later that day, in the school cafeteria, Kubo was hanging out with her friends, and the conversation drifted toward relationships. Tama noticed that Kubo had been glowing recently, and with a curious tone, asked if she had a crush. Kubo was taken aback by the question, but after some persistent prodding by the girls, she finally admitted that she did indeed have a crush on Shiraishi. The revelation left the girls in shock, as they couldn't believe that Kubo, of all people, would fall for a useless nobody who was literally insignificant and invisible to the world. However, Kubo couldn't stand to hear them mock her feelings and sternly told them to keep their opinions to themselves. She hated that they were roasting her Prince Charming and ordered them to shut their filthy mouths. She revealed to them that his invisibility was rizzing her up. Seeing how serious she was, Hazuki playfully teased Kubo, asking how she would react if she saw her hot love interest talking with another girl. This question left Kubo momentarily speechless. The following day, Shiraishi arrived at school early, thinking he was the first one there, only to find Kubo already in the classroom. She insisted that they sit together and listen to some Lil Baby songs. After enjoying some tunes from Kubo's phone, she playfully demanded they listen to music from Shiraishi's phone as well. This request caught him off guard since his playlist was filled with whack old school blues from the 80s, not exactly the kind of music he thought would impress her. Several weeks later, Shiraishi decided it was time to give a gift to the person who had anonymously given him a Valentine's Day chocolate. Assuming that Kubo, being as sharp as she was, might know who the mysterious person was, he picked out a gift from a store and handed it to her, hoping she could help him deliver it to the right person. Kubo was surprised that the dense, brain-dead guy couldn't put his brain cells to good use and figured out that she was the one who actually gave him the Valentine's gift. Keeping her cool, she promised to help him find the right person to give the gift to. In the weeks that followed, Shiraishi began to notice something strange. Normally, whenever he dropped his wallet or ID, it would go unnoticed by everyone around him. But recently, whenever he dropped something, people started to notice and pick it up for him. On this particular day, he dropped his handkerchief, and a blue-haired girl picked it up and handed it back to him. As Shiraishi looked at her, he couldn't help but think her flat plot resembled Kubo's. Just then, Akina appeared and called the girl Saki. Akina quickly recognized Shiraishi as the ugly creep she had caught ogling steamy magazines at the store. With a teasing grin, Akina introduced herself as Kubo's sister and Saki as their cousin. This confirmed Shiraishi's suspicion that flat plots flatter than the latest iPhones seemed to run in their family, and it became clear that Kubo's relatives shared the uncanny ability to notice him. Later that day, Akina and Saki returned home and told Kubo about their encounter with Shiraishi. Akina even mentioned that she had exchanged Discord usernames with him, which piqued Kubo's interest. The next day in class, Shiraishi was informed by the teacher about an upcoming exam. He knew he had to buckle down and study. His mom had threatened to take away his entire manga collection if he failed. Determined not to lose his prized manga, Shiraishi headed to the library later that day, hoping for some peace and quiet to study. Still, he couldn't have a moment of peace as Kubo wouldn't allow the poor victim to be. Shiraishi asked her what she wanted, and she insisted on helping him study. Kubo immediately brought out an eyeglass and informed him she would be his hot teacher. She began by asking Shiraishi that a hard object and a sack are often referred to as blackjack, but Shiraishi had no idea what the heck the nutcase was talking about. After the hands-on lesson, Kubo left, promising they would continue studying together the next day. However, the following day, Shiraishi couldn't attend school. He had come down with a high fever and had to stay home. Meanwhile, in class, the useless teacher, who resembled a Roblox character, announced that Shiraishi was sick and wouldn't be attending. Kubo spent the entire day feeling lonely and downcast because of Shiraishi's absence. She thought about sending him a get-well message and even considered offering to visit him at home, but she hesitated and erased the message. Instead, she sent him a simple message asking if he would be able to come to school the next day. Shiraishi received the message and replied that he would try his best to make it. Just as Shiraishi finished sending his reply, his little brother Sita burst into his room, eager to play. In an attempt to get his attention, Sita accidentally tapped Shiraishi's phone, sending an "I miss you" emoji to Kubo. When Kubo received the message, she was surprised but sent back a response with hugs and kisses. The next day, Shiraishi, now strong, arrived at school to find Kubo, who, upon seeing him, became dizzy at how ugly Shiraishi's face had become and almost passed out. She insisted on going to the school nurse, and as she headed, Shiraishi, who was concerned for her health, held her hands and informed her he wanted to accompany her to the infirmary, which made Kubo excited. On getting to the infirmary, they couldn't find the crackhead nurse, so Shiraishi placed Kubo on the bed and covered her up. As Shiraishi headed to find the worthless nurse, Kubo held his hands and thanked him, causing him to jizz in his pants. Some days later, Shiraishi was excited that he had managed to pass the final exams so his video game would not be seized. While he thought about this, Kubo appeared and asked him why he was that happy. He immediately thanked her for helping him with the tutoring, and she replied that they should do more of it together in the future. However, Shiraishi replied that they are most likely to end up in different classes in the new academic year, and as Kubo agreed to this, the miserable idiot reasoned that the period when he was found by Kubo is about to come to an end. Several moments later, Kubo brought out her umbrella and asked Shiraishi if he had brought one, but he replied that he didn't need to since the rain was forecasted to fall later in the evening. Kubo thought this was perfect and asked that they do an experiment. If they shared an umbrella, would other people notice him? Shiraishi instantly dismissed this, claiming that he would be noticed, and he left. However, it suddenly started to rain, and Kubo saw this as her chance to carry out her experiment. She immediately gave him her umbrella, offering to run home in the rain instead. However, he was uncomfortable watching her go in the rain because he quickly ran after her, and the experiment began. As they walked home in the rain, he reasoned that he had to make sure their shoulders were not brushing, but he soon realized that this seemed like a couple's thing. So he suggested they pass through an empty area where it was unlikely that they would be seen together. After bursting out by the road, Shiraishi was relieved that they had managed to avoid being seen, but Kubo suddenly referred to the fact that they had been alone all the while and asked him if he had done this intentionally, embarrassing him. They later separated, and as soon as Kubo got home, Akina told her that Seki was coming to visit on Saturday. Fast forward to Saturday, as Shiraishi walked across the town. He noticed Saki struggling with some heavy loads, so he offered to help her with them. Meanwhile, Kubo became worried at home that Saki was taking too late to return, so she dashed out of the house in search of her. As Saki and Shiraishi walked together, she asked him what his relationship was with Kubo, whether he was her boyfriend or best friend, but Bro said that they were just classmates. Saki inferred that this meant that they were not close and then bragged that she was close to Kubo, which was why they called each other by their first names. Saki then claimed that she was sure that he didn't know Kubo's first name. Shiraishi defended that he knew her name, so Saki dared him to say it. Kubo met them about this, and Saki told her about it, so she joined her in asking Shiraishi to call her first name, which he eventually timidly called. The following week, while in class, Shiraishi got bored while the short goblin in front taught them, so he decided to dismantle his pen to get busy. However, he lost his spring and immediately felt like a fool under Kubo's watchful eyes. She asked him why he did something so childish and stupid, and he replied that he was curious how it worked. He claimed he should be fine without the pen for the day, but he was shocked when the goblin soon gave them a classwork assignment requiring a red pen. Kubo offered him her girly pen and told him not to let his intrusive thoughts kick in again. Later, after the class, while some students discussed that it was their last day together as a class, Shiraishi just left the class silently like a loner. Later that night, Kubo and her friends had a sleepover and decided to waste the entire screen time. During the break, Shiraishi and his little brother, who resembled a pig, went out to do some shopping for his mom at the grocery store. Meanwhile, since Saki and Kubo were also having a viewing picnic, they decided to prepare lunch. But Kubo excluded herself from the cooking plans because she only knew how to boil water, making Saki sad. However, she held Kubo's hands and told her she would be okay, even if only what Kubo did was to eat her food. They headed to the groceries too, and while they selected the necessary ingredients, Kubo spotted Shiraishi and his disgusting younger brother with fat-ass cheeks, and immediately went over to meet him, patting Seida's head as she met him. Saki also quickly joined them, and as soon as Seida saw her, he became shy because this was the first time she was seeing someone pretty in a long time of living among horrible creatures like himself. Akina, loving what she was seeing, soon joined them too and asked Shiraishi to help them stuff the items they just bought since it seemed like he was a master at it. Afterward, she invited Shiraishi and his little brother to the picnic they were having the next day, to which he agreed. Akina then cunningly asked Kubo, who had opted out of the cooking before, if she was still unwilling to cook as she said earlier, making her speechless. Upon returning home, Kubo was the first to go to the kitchen and start trying to prepare lunch by herself, but the idiot didn't even know how to chop onions. Saki soon joined her and tried to put her through, but Kubo accidentally injured herself, making Saki sad. She told her to allow her to prepare the hamburger steak alone. Kubo became remorseful, sitting like her boyfriend just left her, but Akina soon intervened and gave some TED talk-worthy lecture on learning from mistakes. She then pleaded with Saki to allow Kubo to do it herself while she assisted, making Kubo's eyes light up. Kubo approached them and told Saki she would really love to make the hamburger steak. Afterward, they prepared the steaks together, and Kubo cooked the steak so well on the first try that it would make Gordon Ramsay feel like an amateur. The next day, they all met at Cherry Blossom Viewing and began to eat lunch. Sita went all red as his newfound began to feed him, and as they all ate, Shiraishi noticed the hamburger steaks, but it was not within his reach. Hence, he decided to make do with what was before him, and he didn't want to appear as a glutton. However, Kubo noticed this and took some for him, surprising him as Kubo waited for him to taste it. As soon as he did, he complimented how delicious it was, making her blush. Meanwhile, Akina, who had been observing them all along while she fried her liver, got up and moved closer to Shiraishi to start to get saws with him as the idiot pretended as though he wasn't enjoying it. But a guy's meat doesn't lie. Kubo got angry and left while Shiraishi felt that he had messed up. He followed after her, and his younger brother, noticing that there was a fight, told him to make up with her. However, when he tried to, Kubo only told him it wasn't even his fault. But bro knew too well not to believe women whenever they made such statements, so he got sad and bent down. Sita immediately ran to grab Kubo and told her to make up with his older brother, who was about to cry. She went to meet him and told him that it really wasn't his fault, even though Shiraishi still believed that he messed up. They made up and headed back to the other two while holding one another's hands. A couple of weeks later, Shiraishi resumed his second year, and his lonely, miserable life continued with no one noticing him. He soon got to his class and shockingly discovered that he and Kubo were placed in the same class again, with her seat beside him. Kubo was excited about them being seat neighbors for another year, but she suddenly remembered that there would be no class change in the third year, which meant that they'd be together till graduation. However, bro got so shy that he kept staring out of the window the whole time, and he reasoned that even though nobody usually noticed him, Kubo always found him and played with him, which he never thought was going to be possible. Meanwhile, Kubo met with the numbskulls she called friends, who chose to celebrate their being together in the same class again. They asked about Shiraishi, wondering if he was placed in a different class since they had not seen him anywhere, but Kubo replied that he was also in their class, shocking them that Kubo's Shiraishi spotting skills were crazy. Later that night, when Kubo got home, Akina asked about her first day at school in her new class, and she replied that Tama and Hazuki were in the same class with her. However, Akina further asked about Shiraishi, leaving her wondering why her sister was so particular about him. However, Akina replied that Shiraishi was the only other classmate she knew besides Tama and Hazuki. The next day at school, the little goblin announced that they would all be choosing their student committees. Hearing this, Kubo asked Shiraishi what committee he would choose, but he replied that he would choose whatever was left over since the teacher wouldn't notice him anyway since he was the miserable version of Mr. Invisible. She then talked about him being on the environmental committee the previous year, surprising that she noticed. She stated that the flower beds he was watering became the seventh wonder of the school because everyone thought they were blossoming despite no one taking care of them, shocking Shiraishi. Bro considered unaliving himself at this point because of how useless his existence was. Meanwhile, the down-to-earth teacher suddenly asked if anyone wanted to be on the environmental committee since he was the advisor for that year, but no one raised their hands. He became short of words and almost began to cry. However, Kubo suddenly volunteered to join, making him scurry toward her in excitement. He then asked if any boy would join, and Kubo instantly declared that Shiraishi had raised his hand even though he hadn't. He asked her why she did that, and she said she had always admired him the previous year when he made those flowers wet, and that she wouldn't mind if he made her flower wet too. Later, after the class, some idiots began to gossip about the fact that Shiraishi must have joined the environmental committee because of Kubo, but a guy named Pseudo defended him by telling them that Shiraishi was on the committee the previous year too, surprising Shiraishi, who was watching from afar, that someone else also noticed. After that, they all headed to the lab, where Shiraishi realized he was in the same group as Kubo and Pseudo. He soon realized that Pseudo had forgotten to bring his eraser, so he thought of giving it to him out of the 5 he had, but he was too shy to talk. Kubo noticed this and immediately set him up, which led Shiraishi and Pseudo to start talking. Pseudo revealed that he had been meaning to talk to him, saying he also looked after flower beds the previous year. but they all withered, unlike Shiraishi's own, which blossomed. He had wanted to ask him what his secret was but looked for him all year and couldn't find him. As they later returned from the lab, Shiraishi thanked Kubo for initiating his talk with Pseudo, as this was the first time he enjoyed talking with someone else at school other than her. Kubo got rizzed up and excused herself immediately to blush at the fact that Shiraishi said he always enjoyed talking with her. The following day, Kubo approached Shiraishi with a suggestion. They should have a staring contest. Although hesitant, Shiraishi agreed. Kubo ended up winning, and her excitement bubbled over as she declared that, as the loser, Shiraishi would have to greet her first thing the next morning. Later, while Shiraishi was enjoying the cool spring breeze by the window, some students unknowingly cleaned the chalkboard erasers right next to him, covering his disgusting face in dust. As he went to brush off the chalk, Kubo appeared behind him, offering her assistance. Though Shiraishi tried to decline, Kubo moved closer and gently wiped the dust from his hair, making his heart race. She then commented on the thickness of his hair and invited him to touch hers, which he did after a moment of hesitation. Turning to face him, Kubo asked what hairstyles he preferred on girls. Shiraishi answered that as long as the style suited the girl, he liked it. Unsatisfied with his vague response, Kubo pressed him further, asking which style would look best on her. As she began listing options, Shiraishi shyly admitted she looked nice with a ponytail, then awkwardly walked away. Afterward, Kubo wondered if she should wear a ponytail to school the next day. Afterward, in class, the short, ugly teacher informed the students that their physical exams were scheduled for the following day, advising them to be prepared. After the announcement, as Shiraishi was adjusting his chair, he wondered if he had grown taller over the past year. Just then, Kubo approached him, and he thought she was about to voice the opposite of what he thought. However, she surprised him by asking if he had grown taller. Shiraishi was taken aback by her question and explained that, aside from his family, no one had ever noticed or mentioned his growth, so her observation caught him off guard. Kubo then placed her hands on her chest and asked if he thought she had grown bigger, but Shiraishi saw that she was still as flat as a road surface. She then suggested they check their heights by standing against a wall and using a ruler to measure. After measuring his height, Kubo asked him to hold the ruler while she took his place. As she stood in front of him, Shiraishi couldn't help but appreciate the difference in their heights. Kubo noticed his expression and asked what was on his mind, but before Shiraishi could escape since he was embarrassed, she grabbed him, saying she knew he would try to run. However, the idiot proved her just right as he immediately dashed off like Usain Bolt. On getting outside, he realized he still had the ruler and decided to return it the following day. The following day, as agreed, Shiraishi met Kubo and returned the ruler before heading off. Before their physical exams, Kubo suggested Shiraishi lend her his tracksuit jacket so they could finally settle the question of who was taller. Later in the gym, Tenma quickly noticed that Kubo's jacket seemed oversized. However, Kubo fibbed, claiming it was an old jacket that belonged to her sister. Just then, two girls walked by, and Kubo overheard one of them mention how she liked wearing her boyfriend's jacket because it carried his scent. Curious, Kubo subtly took a moment to smell Shiraishi's jacket. A few days later, while Shiraishi was discreetly watching over Sita during his first solo errand, Akina happened to run into him. She pointed out that he didn't need to be so cautious since no one would notice him anyway. Not long after, Sita returned with the eggs he was sent to buy, and Akina, brimming with pride, playfully embraced the little boy with ash cheeks and praised him for successfully completing his first task. She then reminisced about Kubo's first errand, sharing how Kubo had come home in tears after tripping and breaking the eggs she was supposed to bring back. Akina recounted how she had comforted Kubo until she calmed down and advised Shiraishi to do the same if Kubo ever needed it. That evening, Akina shared the story with Kubo, reminding her of that day, which made Kubo start to sulk. Akina gently stroked her head to soothe her and casually mentioned how much better it would be if someone she liked did it instead. Kubo fell silent, causing Akina to teasingly ask who came to her mind, but Kubo, blushing, refused to answer. A few days later, Shiraishi was engrossed in an announcement about the upcoming release of a movie adaptation of his favorite manga. His concentration was broken when Kubo suddenly approached him. Startled, Shiraishi explained that he had been lost in thought about the movie, to which Kubo surprised him by suggesting they go watch it together. On the day of the movie outing, they took the subway, which was so packed that Shiraishi had to shield Kubo from getting squished. Kubo felt guilty because people kept bumping into him, seemingly oblivious to his presence. After they exited the train, three guys approached Kubo, inviting her to hang out while completely ignoring Shiraishi. Noticing Kubo's discomfort, Shiraishi hesitated, trying to figure out how best to intervene. Finally, he stepped closer to her and spoke up, catching the guys off guard. They wondered how the heck he suddenly got here, as if he had come out of another dimension. But Shiraishi calmly told them he had been there the whole time they were trying to flirt with Kubo. One of the boys asked if they were dating, and just as Shiraishi was about to deny it, Kubo grabbed him and announced that he was her boyfriend. The guys, clearly surprised, quickly backed off, wishing Shiraishi luck. After they left, Kubo thanked him and confessed that she had been a little scared. By the time they arrived at the mall, they noticed that all the best seats were already occupied. Kubo suggested they wait for the next showing, mentioning that she didn't mind staying out late because it gave her more time to spend with him. To pass the time, they decided to explore the mall, starting with a visit to a cafe. When Shiraishi ordered a coffee, Kubo remarked that it made him seem mature, unlike her usual childish persona, and decided to order the same. When he asked if she had ever tried coffee before, she admitted she hadn't. Shiraishi suggested she might prefer juice instead, but when she began to pout, he relented and placed the order. As he considered adding sugar and cream, Kubo noticed that he was drinking his black and decided to do the same. Unfortunately, she found the taste unpleasant and tried his drink, only to realize they were identical. Feeling bad about her first coffee experience, Shiraishi got up to add sugar and cream to both their drinks. Afterward, they headed to the arcade before browsing through a clothing store. While shopping, Kubo noticed the movie was about to start, so they hurried to the cinema. After the movie, Kubo mentioned that Shiraishi's expressions had changed during the film, something that didn't happen often. He explained that he tried not to smile at school because he was concerned that if anyone noticed him, it would be when he was smiling to himself. Shiraishi admitted that he didn't want to be remembered as the guy who smiled at himself, but Kubo reassured him, saying that no matter what expression he wore, she could always understand him perfectly. Later that night, after walking her home, Kubo asked if he would like to hang out with her again, and he agreed. They promised to meet up again before Shiraishi made his way home. The following day after class, Kubo and Shiraishi found themselves alone in the classroom. Since Shiraishi mentioned he hadn't watched the TV program the previous night, Kubo decided to have him take a psychological test. The first question asked how he would shout if he were in a dream, to which Shiraishi replied that he'd probably just shout moo. Kubo playfully teased him, pointing out that it wouldn't be the best reaction if he were being chased by a bear. The next question asked how many flowers he could see blooming, and he answered with just one. His response took Kubo by surprise, leading Shiraishi to worry that he'd said something foolish. However, Kubo reassured him, explaining that it symbolized that he would be loyal to one person for life. Shiraishi was left uncertain whether to feel happy about the prospect of dating someone or concerned that his tendency to go unnoticed might hinder him from finding that person. Kubo then suggested they find another question to answer together. Shiraishi browsed the internet and found one asking how many kittens they could see playing in a room. Shiraishi's answer was one, while Kubo, being a cat lover, said she saw many. When they looked up the meaning, they were both stunned to learn that it represented the number of children they wanted. Embarrassed by the revelation, Kubo quickly excused herself, saying she needed to head home early, and hurried out of the classroom. A few days later, at Kubo's home, she noticed Akina about to drink some coffee. Kubo asked if she could have some too. However, Akina told her she was still too young for coffee. Kubo then revealed she had already tried coffee before. Surprised, Akina asked when this happened, and Kubo mentioned it was on the day she went out. Akina remembered that day clearly because Kubo had been indecisive about her outfit and had even accepted her offer to style her hair. Just before leaving the house, Kubo had asked if her outfit looked odd, and Akina couldn't help but wonder who had caused her usually confident sister to act so shy and cute. Returning to the present, Akina expressed that while she was glad her sister was maturing, it also made her feel a bit lonely since Kubo used to follow her everywhere when she was younger. Kubo reassured her that even though she was growing up, she still looked up to her sister and liked imitating her. She then playfully grabbed Akina's coffee cup and dashed to her room. The next day at school, Shiraishi's stomach growled loudly, drawing the attention of his classmates. Noticing this, Kubo offered him a chocolate bar. When he took it, he noticed she had written a birthday message on it. Shiraishi was surprised and asked how she knew it was his birthday. Kubo confessed that she had seen it on his ID card the day her sister found it. She then handed him a second chocolate bar, which contained a note telling him to check inside his desk. When he did, he discovered a small gift package. Inside was a cute pink figurine. As he held it, he remained silent, leading Kubo to worry if he disliked the gift. However, Shiraishi thanked her and asked when her birthday was. After she told him, she jokingly asked if she should expect a gift from him. He replied that she shouldn't get her hopes up, which made her smile. She then promised to give him a gift next year. Shiraishi admitted that no one usually did anything special for his birthday, so he was genuinely happy she did. As Shiraishi walked home, he couldn't help but wonder why Kubo was the only one who seemed to notice him. Meanwhile, Kubo watched him from the classroom window, reflecting on the first time she became aware of his existence. It had been through Tama's middle school yearbook, where Tama mentioned that Shiraishi was so unnoticeable that people often overlooked him entirely. When they entered high school, Kubo found it curious how no one else seemed to see him, but she was entertained by how people reacted when they finally did. After being seated next to Shiraishi in class, Kubo seized the opportunity to strike up a conversation with him. His shy response intrigued her, and from that moment on, she made it a point to engage with him every day. Will Kubo and Shiraishi eventually date? If you have reached this far, let's confuse the fake fans by commenting "Saws." Also, clap the like button if you love this recap, and subscribe to this channel for more legendary plot adventures.